I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to my lore breakdown of the comic known as Leviathan. Which centers around Virgilius, the main character of Limbus Company. Considering that Book 1 is titled Christmas Eve, yes, that implies that Christmas is still celebrated even in the grimdark world that Project Moon has created. And this story centers around Vigilius, one who would eventually be in charge of admin, from the looks of things, within Limbus Company. Basically the Angela of that game, which involves a bus that's patterned on the express train to hell. Yeah, that abnormality. That's led by a stable, quote-unquote, distortion. But it doesn't explain how he gets to that point. Well, Leviathan is likely to explain at least some of that. Right, where to begin? Oh yes, within a nest of a district. Well, I don't know which nest it is. It didn't say. It looked too nice to be the back streets. Not crowded enough. I mean, by the looks of it, it could be confused for Amsterdam in the Netherlands or St. Petersburg in Russia, as in the city that was patterned on Amsterdam. Clearly, it left quite an impression on Peter the Great. Yeah, the canals and the style of the buildings were similar. Now, we can safely eliminate District 9, as the nest there had a light show, which Roland considered an eyesore. And it's not District 10, as that's basically Korean Las Vegas. It's definitely not District 12, as that nest is in the outskirts now. Oh, sorry. There will be spoilers from Library of Ruina in this. It's not District 14, as based on the Distortion Detective's description of it, and based on Meersalt's image, that wing is big on minimalist/brutalist architecture with white buildings. And not because it's hot there. It's why a lot of the buildings around Spain and the Greek islands, they're big on white, as it doesn't absorb heat. Not as much anyway. And it's not District 22, as it's a little too soon for that to be rebuilt, after a certain fiery, waxy angel of death trashed it. It's not District 23, as none of the fixers covered in this are cannibals. Yeah, that's right. As in, those that are quite a bit open-minded with what they eat, including special pasta with red sauce. Let's move on. Well, it's not District 23 anyway. Not unless the cannibalism is limited to the backstreets. Okay, my theory is that this might be District 11, as in K-Corp territory, as Roland mentioned that it's one of the nicer nests, the same one that Giovanni was born in, and was raised in an orphanage. Anyway, wherever this was set, Virgilius was checking the files within his fixer office. He picked up a file, and across the room, Denvi, one of his fixers, was jokingly jealous of his privileged operator. Yeah. He was one of the 2 males that were part of this office, besides Vigilius. He had light short hair, wore tinted glasses, and was speaking of how he gets to leave early, while they deal with the paperwork. He said that as he threw it towards one of the females, and the one with the long black hair and a ponytail responded by throwing that file in his face, which caused a brief argument between them. Then a short, black-haired male told them to let it slide as Virgilius has kids waiting for him. Yeah, this is someone who has a soft spot for the children at the nearby orphanage. For sure, the other female with a black bob cut with a short braid told Denvi, specifically, that he has no one waiting for him at his place. And that's when Denvi said that he had children in the form of his whittled babies. Or to put it in more simple terms, his tinted glasses that he cleaned spotlessly. And told her that she didn't know what she was talking about. Yeah. I can honestly say that the only way that he's going to get a girlfriend is at weapon point. Now, I would say gunpoint, but there's a high tax, and even getting a gun, never mind the bullets for it, is not only hard to come by, but ruinously expensive, and not just because of the high taxation of it. And even then, due to the ethics law, determining what can and can't be made, it's not worth it. Yeah, thought I'd sum it up there. Right, let's get back on topic. Virgilius got the idea by this point. He'd cover for them if they were busy, and told them to stop complaining. Denvi basically told him not to sweat it and just grab the goodies for the kids, which he had done so already. Then his fixers stopped him and decided to surprise him. Virgilius wanted to know what this was about. Then they handed him additional presents from them, which included firecrackers and a Santa hat that they put on his head. The firecrackers were likely stuffed into his jacket. Well, he couldn't mix them up with the rest of the prezzies. And he understood why they wanted to do that, although he didn't understand the apple that they gave him. According to one of his fixers, it's a custom from District 8. Yeah, this is a first, as that hasn't been mentioned until now. District 8 being H-Corp territory. This is where one of the fixers of his office were from. Apparently it's to wish someone a peaceful night. A rare occurrence in the city, which is traditionally given on Christmas Eve. And while they appreciated this bonding session, they understood that Vigilius had places to go, telling him to take care while out there. Virgilius, who had a mostly blank expression during this exchange, lightly smiled at this concern for him, although he did show this after the door closed. Okay, we can also eliminate District 8 as well as the location of this nest, as one of the fixers spoke as if he wasn't from that nest. He walked out into the residential area. People were going about their business. The buildings were decked out for Christmas. It was as nice as a nest that had a wing intact should be. He then arrived at the door leading to the outside. He showed the guard his fixer license and they let him pass. After a while walking along the streets, he got to a part of his route that normally made him feel relieved, but it was quieter than it should be, making him feel uneasy. He then decided to rush forward with unnatural speed. Ooh, he must have some expensive augmentations to make that possible. After a time, he then stopped to find a scene of destruction, utter devastation, with the sounds of dying people as the buildings were destroyed, including the orphanage that he was going to. He then found the culprit about to tear one of them apart, who tried to defend herself with an axe. This culprit was Tomeri, victims of the Blood Red Knight and the Puppeteer. Well, at least those two won't be coming back. He slashed at his opponent, this abomination, with his sword, and caught the victim, and put her on the floor safely. His attack was apparently enough to drive what was once two separate humans back. He then surveyed their handiwork, and saw some survivors among the dead. He gave nothing away on his face. Ooh, he should play poker then. He'd be completely hard to read. He then asked them what their business was. Who ordered them to do this? Was it their job? Vigilius, their minds were burned out by 2,000 years, give or take, in the warp train. I wouldn't be surprised if the plots of some preschool shows would be more complicated for them to understand. Never mind what you're asking. Anyway, just as he was about to strike at them, he was stopped by Yori, the Purple Tear, who was clearly in her slash stance as she had her katana out. Great, so not only have the deformed, stitched up victims of both a wing and two powerful distortions have been released from the library, but one of the psychotic color fixers has returned as well. Now, this would be good news for Zhao and Lowell, as they can start rebuilding their lives together. It's bad news for Yan, however, that former messenger of the Index. He's still distorted. Now, this is considering that Tomeri is still what they were prior to being killed. This surprised Virgilius, who recognized this old-timer in the fixer business, whom he believed had perished within the library. He clearly didn't get the memo that said that he was brought back by the synthetic spawn of the one that finished the Seed of Light project, and the broken woman that was responsible for the distortion being what it is. Well, she didn't know all of that, but certainly enough to piece it together. At least partially. Now, this is an indicator that Leviathan is set sometime after the golden ending of Library of Ruina, as in where the Pyrrhic victory of one or the other did not happen, but instead something that was comparatively more favourable. But it's also before Limbus Company. Now, responding to Vigilius's remark on her perishing within the library, she claimed that the world was full of curious happenings, as he's lost those little ones, like she happened to need that child. Apparently, Tomeri had something to do with the search for her son. He asked her what the connection was. She told him that the pieces have their place, but it's not his concern. Now, this didn't surprise Vigilius, that she knew, yet stood on the sidelines. The thought that she was willing to have children butchered, pummeled, and beaten to death angered him, as now she's dragging him into her little game. Yori stated that it was a shame about those children, asking the Red Gaze if he'd agree. That's one less pretense for him to wear. Now, gaze is an epithet meaning immortal poet in Korean. And it's revealed that not only is Vigilius an operator, he's also a colour fixer. And based on what he does next, it's clear that he has, well, certainly a similar moral integrity as Kali, the Red Mist. Although he didn't exactly have her independent spirit. As far as we're aware, she wasn't directly affiliated with a fixer office or association. Yes. No fixer office or association that we're aware of, anyway. She was successful at f***ing him off. Certainly enough for him to charge at her. He slammed his sword into the ground, hitting it with enough force to create an impact crater. Yori effortlessly jumped out of the way. She responded with a series of slashes that caused damage to her surroundings, but didn't do that much to him. She then leapt at him and cut his left cheek as she passed by. First blood was to her. She was having fun during this. He leapt after her, and then he found other survivors of Tomeri's attack. Then the purple tear slashed at a nearby ruined building, and it was revealed that she intended to make the building collapse on those that remained. But Virgilius, with everything that he had, delivered multiple slashes to make the building explode. Now, I highly doubt that it was due to the firecrackers he had on him. Those just won't provide enough of an explosion to demolish a building, but whatever he did, the building was cleared away, and the children survived. But his left hand was dripping with blood, and he looked beaten up. He was unwilling to yield to the purple tear. They charged at each other, which resulted in a brief clash, which resulted in Vigilius dropping his weapon before holding it to try and stand up. She mocked him, telling him that there's no point in dragging it out. But he wasn't paying much attention to this. He was barely staying conscious. The ringing in his ears was a sign that this fight to stay conscious was failing. As he saw on the floor was a sack filled with small bags of sweet treats, a partially broken apple, and his blood spilling on the ground. Now, if this was the same orphanage that Giovanni was from, what would Nezhak think? I highly doubt that he'd like this. And as for Hana Association, I doubt they'd tolerate the Purple Tear's actions here. I mean, using Temeri to attack within a nest? Destroying an orphanage? Best case scenario, they'll send a whole army of fixers to kill her. Worst case scenario, they'll do to her what they did to Roland and demote her to the bottom of the pile. And that's assuming that they can stop her. Now, Temeri and Purple Tear, they showed that due to someone's intervention, there's no controlling where or when they'd reappear, all of those killed within the library. As for the differences in their combat style, Yori was clearly the more experienced and agile combatant, while Vigilius relied more on brute strength, which didn't really work out so well in this battle, did it? As she simply jumped out of the way. You might need to adjust his tactics. As we know, he clearly survives, but not how. As for Virgilius himself, he seems to be a combat-oriented fixer, although he's not subtle enough to be a She Association affiliate. And that's considering that the Full Stop office were big on guns and didn't look like they were pseudo-ninja. He's also not defensive enough to be a Zwei Association affiliate. Although I can't be sure. I'm thinking he's likely to be affiliated with the Liu Association, due to his lack of being subtle. Okay, he's not that big on incendiary attacks, but outside of the Liu Association proper, it appears to be optional. Yuna of the Dawn office seems to be evidence of that, as her primary weapon is a classical instrument case filled with knives. Now, individuals like Vigilius are rare in the city, which, according to the Limbus Company trailer, has been operating for at least 985 years. So the date as of Limbus Company's setting is probably closer to the 3020s. And the city is noted to be having a population of over 6 billion. Yeah, that's the total population of the entire planet around the latter half of the 20th century in the space of at least 25 smaller cities. Well, cities as we would know it, as the city as depicted in the Project Moon universe is probably closer to a mega city. Also, where is District 26? Z-Corp? Is it in the water? Underground? On the moon? Now, that last one would actually make sense, considering who the developer, or rather, what the developer is known as. Well, that was an explosive start to the backstory of Vigilius, the Red Gaze. Let's hope they can keep it up. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!